Welcome to our first installment of our Winter Speaker Series 2018. We're really excited about the theme this year being fire due to recent experiences in Alberta and BC. Our first speaker tonight, my name is Samantha Bonwick from Venture Creek. I'm not sure if I introduced myself, but our speaker tonight is Venture Creek Deputy Fire Chief Pat Neumann, and he's here to talk to you all a little bit about fire prevention, emergency preparedness, and just answer some questions that you may have. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. Thank you, Samantha. So what I really want to talk about tonight, there's a couple of different things. And I know I talked to Samantha about some stuff, and we talked about emergency preparedness. And then along with that comes back to the one thing that's been really prominent over the last 6 months or a year for us has been fire smarting, and of course the wildfire seasons that we had. So what I'm here tonight, I really want to talk kind of about that whole group of stuff. And then of course with the recent weather we've had, it fits in with emergency preparedness. So I'm going to start off with kind of the emergency preparedness aspect of stuff and what we think it is and what it really means to us as a group of people. So what does emergency preparedness mean? To me, it means that I'm prepared to deal with things that happen within my house or within my family or within my life. The Alberta government says that in any situation, and it could be the weather that we experienced last week, how many people here from out of town? Yeah, exactly. How many people were able to get in over the last 3 days successfully? Yeah. Quentin was.
I've heard that there were a number of people that couldn't get on the highway.
Get on the highway, yeah. So a couple different things happened over the last three or 4 days in our community. So first of all, yeah, we had a really, really bad winter kind of blizzard storm blow through with heavy winds that created lots of drifting snow. In fact, the highway was closed for about 14, 16 hours on Friday night to Saturday morning. So what did that mean for emergency preparedness? If you were stuck on the highway, I should have been prepared to either spend a night in another community or possibly even spend my night in a car. And so the Alberta government suggests that we have something called a 72-hour kit. And what they're looking for in that is everything that I need to take care of myself, the people that are around me, and even my pets for 72 hours. What kind of things would I want in a kit like that? I'd want water, enough food to take care of myself and whoever else is with me. I'd want my medications, flashlight, maybe a wind-up radio because you may be in a situation where you have no power. Some source of fire, maybe candle, matches, something like that, kind of like our Boy Scout kit. First aid kit, basic stuff like that, stuff to keep us warm. Basically the things that in an emergency situation, if I was stuck in my house or I was stuck out like some of the people, and I think just now we're finally getting all of the roads opened up around the MD, that there's people that have been basically stuck in their houses for 2 or 3 days that weren't able to get out. So basically enough supplies that I can take care of myself for 72 hours. Okay. And that also applies to our automobiles. Make sure that you've got things in there. Make sure you've got an extra jacket, you've got a blanket, you've got some type of flashlight and a radio and ways of dealing with that. Travel in the wintertime means traveling with a full tank of fuel. Don't run it down to empty. My wife is terrible for that. And they talk about, so if I get stranded on the highway, what should I do? In the case that we had here the last few days, we had people that were basically staying in their vehicles. The RCMP were able to get out and get to them. But you can run your car as long as your exhaust system is clear and functioning properly. So you want to make sure the snow is clear to wear, but you can only run it for 10 minutes out of every 30. And the reason is because we're worried about carbon monoxide poisoning and other off-gassing. So emergency preparedness is about being prepared. And that's really what it comes down to, because we have what kinds of storms we have. We have winter storms like we just saw last week. This last summer, the wildfire situations down near Waterton Park. Lots of people were forced out of their homes, and they were out for many, many days. So same thing, if you have that emergency pack with you, when you go out of your house, you grab your 72-hour box, you throw it in your car, then no matter where you end up, you know that A, you've got 3 days of medications, right? You got enough food and water to take care of yourself, you got some extra clothes, you've got your personal papers and effects, such as passports, licenses, a bit of extra cash, the types of things that you need to be able to take care of yourself, right? The Alberta government, basically, they lay out 72 hours. They figure that within 72 hours, typically what happens in an emergency situation is that when something big happens, and if you think back to the Kenow fires we had this year, even think about the blizzard that we kind of went through over the last couple of days, typically after 72 hours, we've kind of got things sorted out, and the emergency services, police and fire and the ambulance and the hospitals and our local public works departments and stuff like that have kind of got things sorted out enough that we're able to, first of all, help take care of the people that are displaced, and second of all, possibly even get the people that are displaced back to where they need to be. You know, and that's why they've kind of set that 72 hours as their kind of idea. And absolutely, if medications is a big issue and stuff like that, making sure that you've got more is always better. It's just got to be able to be manageable for you to be able to get it to where you want to go. For people that are looking for more information on that, go to Alberta Emergency Management. You search it on the web, it'll pop up, and on their site they've actually got exactly what the provincial government suggests. And as you mentioned in Cardston, there's lots of other things that you can put in, and put in the stuff that you think that you're going to want in an issue for in an event for 72 hours or more, being without the things that you normally have. So that's what I would suggest there. And so if we've kind of taken care of that, what I'd like to do is I want to talk a little bit about, and it's an odd time of year to talk about, but I want to talk a little bit about fire smart and wildfire type stuff, because I know it's been a big interest for a lot of people. I know some people have been displaced or were involved heavily in the wildfires that we had this summer, and I mean we had them everywhere from Waterton Park all the way up to the northern part of our MD, up Highway 22, and then lots of little stuff in between. So for us, it was a very, very busy fire year. And if you read the long-term forecasts, it's looking like this is something as climate change and different things happen, we're going to experience more and more of as we move into the future. Okay, so Alberta government has a program called Fire Smart, and basically what it is, and it doesn't include just rural areas. It's for all communities, town, city, rural areas, urban interface. The ski resorts and your parks areas and stuff like that. And what we're talking about is being able to protect your property in the event of fire moving from outside your property onto your property. Okay. And so what we do is we actually break it into 3 separate zones. We talk about the area around our house and the different things that we can do to protect our house. And that's out to 10 meters or about 30 feet. And we talk about making sure our lawn is mowed, making sure that if we're doing the roof on our house, next time we put a roof on her, we look at a non-flammable type of roof material, whether it be metal or asphalt shingles, or they've got some neat clay tile stuff, but making sure that we're building with non-flammable building products. Cedar shakes, while they're actually really, really pretty, pose a huge hazard. Okay. And then same thing when we're doing the outside surfaces on our house, we're looking at, you get out into the forestry, we're looking for houses that are either heavy timber, so log houses do fairly well, stucco, that new masonite or cement board siding that they use is actually very, very good. Vinyl siding, not so good, because it's quite flammable. Other things when we talk about that, firewood. How many people here use wood-fired fireplaces or wood stoves in your house? Where do you keep your wood? Where do you keep your firewood? Yeah, so for people that have wood stoves, and the one that I always see all the time, and some of the rural areas I go to, and they got their beautiful pile of firewood. Where do they pile it? They pile it right up against the side of their house, right? Because it's easy to access, and it doesn't get covered with snow because I've got it either in the carport or I've got it covered up right up against the side of the house. The problem with that is that when we got fire running towards an area, and we've done everything else on the property, we've mowed our lawn, we've got a nice decent roof, we've got good quality siding on there, we've cleaned out our eaves troughs, we've moved our propane tanks away, we've got a stack of firewood there. firewood is firewood, and when it gets embers and stuff in it, it burns. And I've seen it happen on numerous occasions. I remember 1 year ago that we looked at that an ember had fallen through a deck into a pile of firewood that the guy had stored underneath the deck, burned back up through the deck, and burned his house down. So it happens. So what we're asking people to do in that first 10-meter zone around your house is get rid of all the stuff that's flammable. Don't use things like, the beautiful creeping junipers and stuff that look so awesome in flower beds out in front. They're like gasoline. They're actually very, very flammable. Or the nice bark mulch bark and different things that we use are actually also very flammable. Look for, and somebody, I think it was you, was telling me that you have a natural rock or what's the term? Zero-scape lot. Yeah, exactly. So very, very fire resistant, right? Absolutely. So look for stuff to that effect. So what we're really trying to do is reduce the impact of fire coming onto the property. So our next zone from 10 to 30 meters out, so from 30 feet to 100 feet out, I'm talking about if I've got trees coming up to the property, and it's not so much in town, but people live along the creek banks and different things like that. We're looking at reducing the amount of fire buildup in that area. So if you're in town, that might mean trying to coax communities into having get all the garbage and different things picked up, mow down the dead grass, get that stuff baled up. In the forestry, or if you're up in the urban interface, say Castle Mountain, what we're talking about is reducing the fire load in that next 60-foot zone. Right, I'm going to take and remove the lower limbs off the trees. I'm going to pick up the deadfall in the ground. I'm going to get rid of all the dead leaves. I'm going to clean up the lawn in there if I can. And so what it does is that fire, when it comes into the forestry, it typically runs up in trees. But to get to the top of the trees, how does fire get to the top? It actually has to start on the bottom, and it works its way up. So if I remove the ladder fuels and I remove the ground cover underneath that, I reduce the ability of that fire to climb where it wants to be. So that next 50 feet, 60 feet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the amount of ground cover in there. I'm going to make it so that that fire reduces its intensity as it approaches the property that I'm trying to protect. Okay, and then everything out farther out, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, it may not be our property, it may be something you have to talk to forestry, you have to talk to the community you're working with, but you can do things like take out deadfall. You can reduce some of the fire hazard in there too, but what you're trying to do is produce an area where you reduce that ability of that fire to travel. Okay, now that's fire smarting in a nutshell. It's basically the idea of trying to reduce the amount of fire that comes into the area we're trying to protect. We did try to do, we worked with, and we ran courses on it, or not so much courses, but open houses last year in the MD. We're going to be doing them again this year for people so that we can try to push the program out into the community, because it makes a huge difference. It really does. I've seen lots and lots of fires over the years where an area that, the lawn is nicely mowed, the firewood's pulled away, you can see little burn marks in the grass, but it stops, and the fire basically, it'll burn right around the property like that and keep on going. So once a wildfire, it could be a grass fire. We dealt with some of those this year that ran. I've seen grass fires. Well, Granum fire. How many miles did that thing run? Remember, about 35 miles in the end. Biggest grass fire in Western Canadian history. Right? Dangerous, just a grass fire, right? If I remember correctly, there's one fatality in that one, and a pile of cattle lost, and hundreds of miles of fence line, and a couple of structures, right? So grass fires can be just as dangerous as wildfire. Now, the biggest difference with the grass fires is more unpredictable, right? So, and the biggest reason for that is typically a grass fire that's moving like that is very much wind driven. And they'll go up to 65, 70 miles an hour. You can't keep ahead of them. So what do I do to protect? If I have to leave my place, right? So first of all, the very first thing that we want people to do is listen to your radios, listen to your authorities, listen to the people in power. That may be the RCMP, may be the fire department, it may be your reeve and council or your mayor and council. Depending on how things are set up, or it may be the emergency management agency within the community that you live, but they'll provide information. They'll provide stuff for evacuations if need be, right? So listen to the authorities. If they're asking you to leave, or if you're planning on leaving, there's certain things that you can do to your property. First of all, make sure that you've done your fire smarting stuff. If you've got a jerry can sitting on the deck, tuck it in the garage. If you've got a bunch of debris, you know, how many people you got your deck? And I remember as a kid, we had a deck on our house. What did it have underneath it all the time? Well, you know, it had the old stuff from the old lawn furniture. It had a whole bunch of leaves, and the grass had grown up through it and different things like that. Clean it up. That's a fire hazard, right? Then you can do is you can water the property around your place, get the sprinklers set up and such. If you're on a rural water system, make sure that you can water it down. It may not, depending on how things go, you may end up losing power, but if it's dampened down, same thing. It reduces that ability, that fire to travel, right? And then once you're done, same thing. Take everything that you need for 72 hours or more, depending on how you're set up, and evacuate and follow the routes and such that people have given you. The information, unfortunately, in situations that happen like that, information is difficult to come by sometimes. You know, and in the particular case of the Kenow wildfire, that there was multiple jurisdictions involved. So we had the federal government, the provincial governments of both Alberta and BC, Montana's state government was involved because it actually ended up running across the border eventually. Plus we had Alberta Parks, we had Alberta Forest and Agriculture involved, we had municipal government involved, and then of course federal parks. So it was a whole bunch of multi-jurisdictional issues. Now, as far as information travel, where did the information bottleneck, or did it actually bottleneck, or was the information not available? And that's questions that we're still looking for some answers for. I can't, when the fire ran into the park on Monday night, you know, so fire does certain things. So I'll talk briefly, and this might help with understanding why information was tough. So tough to find, especially in that first 24 hours of that fire event. Wildfire tends to do a few different things, right? First of all, do we know how fire runs? Lots of us probably played with fire as kids. What does it normally do when it gets on the landscape? And how does it move? What does it want to do? So typically fire, it'll burn up a mountain because it likes to burn uphill. Why? Because the heat pushes it uphill. It works really good. How about burning down the other side or through a valley? It tends to slow it down, right? So fire likes to burn uphill, and it's pushed by wind, driven by wind. Now, fire during the daytime hours or the nighttime hours, depending on how we look at it, does certain different things. Fire's happiest when what conditions are met? You want, it's got to be dry. So low relative humidity. When do we find the lowest relative humidity in a day? Yeah, kind of mid-afternoon. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon to say 5, 6 o'clock at night, depending on the time of year it is. And as we're moving into September, that window actually kind of narrows. We had some very unusual conditions this year. In fact, it did the opposite of what it would have normally done. But typically, our biggest fire runs we see kind of in that mid-afternoon. And so for me as a firefighter, the scariest time of the day for me when I'm looking at wildfires or grass fires or you know, combine fires, baler fires, and different things like that, is right after, just after lunch, kind of till about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Because that's when we typically see, first, that's when we see the most fires. And I've got we can back that up with statistics. It's a known fact. And second of all, that's when we see the most severe fires, because that's when everything is at its driest. So in the cycle of weather, the sun sucks all the moisture out, brings it into the atmosphere. So it sucks it out of all of our materials on the ground, pulls it back into the atmosphere, because that's what it does, right? Heat evaporates water. Makes sense. Then as the day cools off, that water gets driven back from the air back into the ground and remoistens our materials on the ground. So typically what we see in a wildfire situation, even when we've got a really bad fire running, normally as we start to see that 5 o'clock hour, we'll see a fire, and the term they use, the fire goes to sleep. So we'll actually see that fire kind of lay down for the night. So if it was running as a crown fire, that fire might actually come back out of the crown. And what I mean by crown is it's running in the treetops, along the top of the trees, being pushed or pushed by the wind, or actually sometimes it'll create its own wind depending on how big a fire it is. It'll actually push it down back into the ground. It's not that the fire's dead, but it's burning the tree stumps and it's burning through the underbrush and all the different stuff like that. And then as the daytime, as it starts to warm up in the day, that fire intensity starts to pick up as the relative humidity decreases. So what happened on September 11th is on that Monday, so the fire had run across into the park during the hottest part of the day. It made its run around the mountain there and started to come down, and then it kind of did exactly what we thought it was going to do. So the guys that were watching it, and these are the people with way more years experience than me, watched this fire, and it basically laid down for the night, they thought, by about 5 o'clock. So the fire had decreased in intensity, it had moved out of the crown, it was kind of not laying dormant, but it was making slow progress. They thought things had kind of settled. Now, unfortunately for parks and Alberta forests and agriculture, we then had a 100-kilometer-an-hour wind come up, or thereabouts, that did two things. First of all, it continued the drying process, so it kept that relative humidity low for longer. And then the other thing we saw is that I remember being down there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the temperature on the side of the road was 23 degrees at 3 o'clock in the morning in mid-September. It's kind of unusual, right? So as far as why the information was where it was at, I think some of it they got caught off guard, Hugh. Now, the stuff that happened, say, in days prior to that, those are questions I can't answer. I don't have access. I didn't have that information. We were being fed the information through federal parks and out of BC, but there just wasn't a lot of it there. And part of the reason is at the time for the provincial government in BC, it was a fire burning in an area that didn't matter to them. And I know that sounds funny, but it was burning in the forestry. And if you think of BC last fall, what was happening in BC through the summer and into the fall was they had fire everywhere. And this, in their mind, was a relatively small fire. And I honestly, I don't think they had the resources to fully deal with that. Explain, so as a fire department, because that's where I was, and I was actually down there that night, I'll explain what we did. So you're right, your fire department did what a fire department does. We responded to a call for help for a fire that was burning, that was expected to possibly leave the park. When I got the call, they said, we have a grass fire that's burning on the edge of the park, we need a hand. That was the information that I got. I got down there, it was a little bit different than that. It was actually a lot bigger than that. But the fire department, so we still had fire personnel. At the time, there was still another crew that was in Lumbrick that would have responded to other calls in the area, right? At no time did Pinch Creek Emergency Services or our people work within the park, right? That was, you saw all the stuff on the news, all those fire departments. That was Lethbridge and Calgary and Tabor and there was a dozen different companies or different fire departments working in there. Our fire department we worked within the municipality of Pincher Creek, and that's our mandate. So, I know up until the day the fire ran, we were getting lots of periodic updates, and I mean, they were actually posted in media and stuff like that, but at that time, you're right. I mean, so to give you an indication of how fast that fire moves, so at 5 o'clock, that fire was 18,000 hectares. By 3 o'clock in the morning, that fire was 36,000 hectares in size. So within a period of 8 hours, that fire doubled in size. Right. So from that information point of view, from 5 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning when that fire was done running, there was no way that we could get that information out. But yeah, prior to that, Hugh, I can't answer that. And then after that, I know there was there was information available on the fire size, but after that by the morning of the Tuesday, the fire had stopped moving. It was still burning in burnt areas. It was making maybe tiny little gains in some of the forest reserve right along the MD and park and forestry boundaries. But there was no longer, especially within the MD and the grasslands and the shrublands and stuff like that, there was no more extension. It was just a matter of containing and controlling what had already happened. It was, and contrary, there's lots of stuff out there that they're saying, well, the fire department did nothing for that fire. Well, realize that us as a fire department, first of all, forest lands firefighting isn't something that a municipal fire department does, and it's not that we can't do it, but it's not what we're trained to do, right? So what we do is we use our resources. And in our case, we had our staff down there. We did mostly structural protection. I brought in people from Alberta Parks, Agriculture and Forests, had a couple crews that were working underneath our command. We had Federal Parks had a couple of crews that were working underneath our command. And then we also had access. We had the tanker groups and the helicopters also working. So while there is rumors in the community that there was no help for people out there, there was actually air support out there all the time, and they were flying there all the time. And it's tough to see unless you actually know. And that information may not have been very easily. It was difficult to get out, I think, in those first couple of days after that fire. So, okay. All right. So, Fire Smart. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about that. It's been a really big topic now with everything that we saw in the last 6 months. Home safety. Talk a little bit about that. We talked about being prepared, 72-hour kit, what I want to do with that. What else do you do to take care of your home, make sure you're safe in the event of a fire?
Have a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, cool. How often do you check your fire extinguisher?
How often?
Yeah.
Once a year.
Do you? Excellent. Do you ever have take it down to, say, cost or somebody like that and have it recertified or anything like that?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, excellent. Good for you. So one of the reasons I want people to do that, and this is something that, up until I did fire about 15 years ago, I had no idea. I packed it around in my car. I had it in my kitchen. I was a good old little soldier. But I ended up with an engine fire in a car one time. I grabbed it out of the car. I'd been riding around the car for 5 years. Guess what? I went like that, and it was packed in there like cement. That's the reason I want. That's why I was asking. I was getting on that. So make sure you get them checked, because just because you have one, you got to make sure that they actually work. And the baking soda or the type of product in there will actually pack down over time and becomes almost ineffective. Okay. What else do we have for home safety devices in our house?
Smoke alarm.
Yeah, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. The new building code for those. So in new construction. They want you to have one in every single bedroom of your house, one in the hallway outside the bedrooms, one close to any gas-fired appliance. So that would be, like you were talking, you had a wood gas-fired stove, right? And so they want you to have a carbon monoxide detector in that case, right? So what do we know about carbon monoxide? Odorless, colorless gas, right? That you can't tell when it's in the atmosphere. I've been to several carbon monoxide poisonings over the years, and most of the people that I talked to after the situation had no clue that there was an issue. Right? Carbon monoxide detectors save lives. So if you haven't got one in your house, and they come in different, you can either get the plug-in ones that plug in down low. You can get the ones that are part of the smoke detector. The other thing they're telling us nowadays, part of the building code, is to have a battery backup on all of your smoke and fire alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. Now, so you got those. How often should you check those? Right, we tell people to change your batteries once a year. You should actually test that thing. Press the little test button on it once a month. How often do you think you ever have to replace that smoke detector or carbon monoxide detector? How many have ever yeah, depending on how new it is, it actually has a sticker on it. So a smoke detector, roughly every 10 years. It says right on it, it'll come, you'll pick it up. I'll go up to Walmart, I'll buy one today, it'll say on it 2018, or it'll say expires in 2028. It's good for 10 years. And actually the newer ones are smart enough now, so when you hear that, the one that wakes you up in the middle of the night all the time, little beep, you wait a minute, it goes beep, you wait a minute, it goes beep, and you think, what on earth is going on? 99% of the time, that's the smoke detector telling you that its life is done and wants to be replaced, right? What fails in them? Why do we replace them every 10 years? It's not so much that the detector itself fails, but it's the environment that we keep them in. So they get gummed up from smoke in the air, they get dust in them and different things like that. What ends up happening is they actually become less effective. Not so much that they quit working, they just become less effective. And what we found over time is that, or the UL or CSA's found over time, that to keep them effective, they replace them every 10 years. So, and the carbon monoxide detectors, depending on the brand and the type that they are, they could be 5 years or they could be 10-year replacement also. So they've gotten a lot better that way. So carbon monoxide detectors should be in everybody's house. Code requires that any house that has an attached garage or a house that has a gas-fired fireplace or wood stove or such. All right. Questions about that type of stuff? So fire extinguisher, carbon monoxide, smoke detectors, right? How about if, nobody here probably lives in a 2-story house, right? Okay, because you can get in the main thing is in a house, you have to have 2 exits, right? I have to be able to know 2 ways out. So if I can go out my front door, that's fine. If I can go out my back door, that's fine. What happens if I get trapped, the fire's in a bedroom in the hall, and I'm in the next bedroom down the hall? How do I get out of my house? I can go out the window, right? Because building code requires that our windows are egress windows. How about if I'm on the 2nd floor? They actually make, it's not a code thing yet in Canada, but they actually make a ladder that you can have, a safety ladder that you can throw out the window and climb down. So something else to think of. And it's not so much, we're seeing more and more 2-story houses within the town and within the MD, but it's a real big issue, say, in the cities. Not so much here. So how about the types of fires that we see around our house? So we're at home. What kind of fire that would be common that we might see in our house related to stuff? And
In the house or
yeah, in the house, yeah. So you're working around your house.
be stove related?
Yeah, stove related. That's the number one actually, right? Stove related fires. So what's the easiest way to deal with a stove related fire? They tell you, first of all, a fire extinguisher isn't really good, especially if it's hot oil or such. Best thing to do is just take a pan, cover it up, or throw a towel over it or such, then you'll smother the fire. Don't put water on it, because you put water in boiling oil, and then it turns in. And the really good demonstration of that is I watch Mythbusters, and you've watched them do that. They did that one, and they did the one with the bean can in there where they don't open the can, and it's wild. And we've seen several of those over the years where we've had grease fires on stoves. And like I said, the easiest way of dealing with them is just cover them up. Okay. The other one is, and I know none of you here have wood burning appliances in your house, is ash pails and wood burning. Working with those, and I probably go to 2 or 3 calls a year related to improper storage and disposal of fire materials, so ashes after the fact. So they'll haul them out in their plastic buckets, set them on their deck. Well, the fire's been out for 3 days, right? So it's safe. The problem is ashes work as an insulator. That's how the first Americans that came here, North Americans came, and the Indians. That's how we moved fire around. Is we kept it in a container surrounded by ashes, that hot coal, to protect it. The same thing applies to our wood stoves. And I mean, I have a wood stove in my house, and I've gone back 5-6 days later, and you stir them around, and there's still hot spots in there. Right, so what we ask people to do if they're burning stuff like that, metal container with a lid. Put it outside, let it sit for a week or 2, and then you can dispose of it. But I've seen ones where people have taken and they've run them down the side of their driveway in their flower beds, because ashes and the potassium in there is potassium soda is very good for flowers, right? And then it gets off into the grassland beside that in a heavy wind. Or they'll take and set the one I remember, it was a plastic bucket. The guy said, "Well, I do it all the time. I've just been lucky." Right? So proper storage of materials like that. I know my wife was talking to me that one the other night. Was they were saying that they read an article, and I haven't had a chance to research it yet, that somebody had taken their hot laundry out, set it on top of the dryer while it was still a little bit damp, and it had actually spontaneously ignited. Now, I haven't had a chance to research that, but as far as dryer fires, the biggest thing that we need to do there is clean out our lint traps and clean out the venting hoses and stuff that go out of them. And that's another cause. That's a good point, right? So that's another cause. And I've only seen one of those actually in the years that I've done this. But a lot of times you'll get lint build up in the tube that leads outside. It needs to be cleaned out, and then of course that lint trap in the front. So Absolutely. And then the biggest thing that I tell everybody is just keep all of your appliances well maintained. So if it's shutting off and overheat all the time, there's probably a reason it's doing that. Get the service guys in and have it checked. So, absolutely. The wildfire season, and we talk about, like you mentioned, an interesting term. We call it the wildfire season. In southern Alberta, our wildfire season runs from January to December. Interesting enough, some of our biggest fires, the Kenow Fire ran in December. December 15th, 2000 or 1995. I know a fire a couple of years ago that we had out near the gas plant. Same thing. It was beginning of January. The Kenow Fire, same thing, ran typically out of what we consider wildfire seasons. Normally by the time we hit that beginning September, we've kind of moved out. Traditionally, we would consider that moving out of the fire season. But because of the drying westerly winds that we see down here and the unseasonably warm temperatures that we can see year-round, our fire season is basically year-round. Like I went to a grass fire just before Christmas that we got lucky on. It was 110 kilometer an hour winds. It was started by an ash pail. It ran about 400 or 500 feet through dry grasslands. But fortunately, because of the amount of snow we had this year, it hit a snowdrift. And so it had stopped itself. So there's never a time that we shouldn't be vigilant of wildfire on our landscape. And even in the heavy snow conditions that we seem to see around right now, if you go out into our fields, you'll see there's lots and lots of fields now that are totally bare. And with the drying winds that we've seen and we're going to see over the next few days, it'll dry out that stubble and stuff again. So, right? And one of the risks that we run is that when we haven't had a lot of snow cover and we haven't had a chance to kind of get that stuff eaten off by animals, we tend to build up a lot of dead stuff along in our ditches and our, the edges of our fields and different things like that can increase our hazard levels. So the process, and I guess I can touch on that briefly. So in the town of Pincher Creek, fire pits are allowed. We've got a permitting process in place. All you do is you just come down to the fire department. We'll issue you a permit, and a lot of times, if it's a new one, we'll actually come out and inspect it. And what we're looking for is, first of all, that it's got a mesh grate for the top, that you've got material around it that's gravel or brick out a certain distance, so that any sparks that manage to get out are arrested before they go anywhere. That it's placed in a safe area, so it's not underneath trees or overhangs from your house or different things like that. And the rules for using a fire pit is you have to burn proper wood. Like it doesn't become a garbage receptacle. You can't burn your leaves or your newspapers or your old gas bills or different things like that. Partially, it's designed as a recreational fire pit, no different than what you'd find at a campground. So, if you've got concerns like that, just contact the department. If you give us the address, you know what, and I mean that's one of the services we offer. We'll go out and we'll have a chat with people, and we'll have a look at if they're using a fire pit, I'm more than happy to go out and inspect it. And if they haven't got a permit for it, I'm more than happy to talk about it. It's for us, it's more about bringing people into compliance than punishing people. I don't want to punish people. I want people to stay safe. Right, it's about making sure that people work safely within the system. So, absolutely. So yeah, fire pits, and I mean they're allowed in the MD. We permit fire pits within the MD, the same as we do in town. We also permit burn barrels with the same kinds of rules. We want them to have a mesh cover on them. We want them to have an area around them that's fireproofed. Right, and we also issue permits based on the same process that the Alberta Agriculture and Forests, in that we issue a 10-day burn permit. So if you had, say, a brush pile or something like that you wanted to burn in the MD, that we'll issue a 10-day permit for that.
So how long did you get a permit for in town to?
So fire pit permit, we issue it. Well, in town, you can only get a fire pit permit, and that's only to burn natural products like basically wood. Yeah. Right? I don't expect people to burn. Well, you could burn dry tree branches, right? But you need a fire permit to do that. Yeah, and a fire permit, we issue them yearly. And I mean, so basically what happens, like if you came in and got one today, it would expire beginning of April. It would expire April 1st, and you get another one at the beginning of April, and it's good until the following April. right? So we issue them on a yearly basis, and they're no cost. I'll touch briefly on the process for the response, because I know there was questions on how do the fire departments respond within typical communities. So Pinch Creek Emergency Services, we have 3 stations. We've got one in Pinch Creek, we've got one in Beaver Mines, we've got one in Lumbrick. And within those stations, we have medically trained firefighter personnel that, so in the 2 outlying stations, Beaver Mines and Lumbrick, if you require an ambulance, the ambulance is sent out to Pinch Creek. The first response is done by either Beaver Mines or Lumbrick, and we do have medically trained staff there that will arrive on scene, get the patient stabilized, and then the ambulance will go over and take over once they're there. Now, as far as fire, if Lumbrick goes out on a call, like for example, they've been very, very busy over the last couple of days with the highway conditions and such. Highway traffic accidents, if it's out in an area, they'll respond. Pinch Creek goes in as kind of a backup and as extra hands for them. And same thing if we go out towards Beaver Mines. So Pinch Creek, basically, the station in Pinch Creek typically will respond to anything within the town and within the MD. Lumbrick and Beaver Mines will respond within their kind of corresponding areas, and then if we have things happening in our area, they will come here and they'll give us a hand anytime, because we're actually they're not separate departments, they're all part of the same department. We're one big station. So Pinch Creek Emergency Services, unlike say City of Lethbridge, for example, or the town of Tabor. The town of Tabor, City of Lethbridge, they have a fire department. Their fire department serves the bordered community of Tabor, the bordered community of Lethbridge. And if they leave that area, it becomes a mutual aid response, which means they basically have to kind of be invited in by that neighboring fire department. The town of Pinch Creek, our councils in their wisdom and very much so, it's a great system, is that our fire department is one. We are one group of people that respond within the town and the MD, and it's for us it's very functional, because it means that when I do training, we train everybody the same way, right? So we all work together. So if you get a fire response, you get Pinch Creek, you get Beaver Mines, you get Lumbrick. Like for example, last structure fire we had in town, I had 2 of the 3 stations here working on it. So, yeah.
Where are you dispatched from?
So we're dispatched out of City of Lethbridge Dispatch. So they provide 911 service. So if you call 911, what ends up happening is they'll say, what is the nature of your emergency? Fire, ambulance, police. Then they route it accordingly. So if it's fire, it stays in Lethbridge. And that information is picked up and then it's transmitted back to us. And we've got a couple different ways we get it. We had via the radio that you see most of our firefighters packing. And then just recently I've added the ability to have that same information. So we get what we call a kind of a run sheet that gives us address, nature of the call, what's involved, if there's people involved, all the type of pertinent information that we're looking for as we're arriving on scene. And it comes to our cell phones via text message. So and what it did is the reason we moved towards that was because sometimes our radios out here, because of the mountainous terrain and different things, can provide issues, right? So why are we dispatched out of Lethbridge? One of the main reasons, because they're close to us and they actually have an understanding of the geographical locations that we work in compared to Calgary, right? Like I realize they're not here, but for the town and the MD to try to staff a 911 call center within our municipality would be very, very cost prohibitive. If it's inside your house, like you have a wood stove or you got a fireplace in your house, I don't permit those. But anything outside that you can light a fire in, I want to know that you have it. And as funny as it sounds, the biggest reason for that isn't so much because I think people don't know how to light a fire. It's because what happens in today's day and age with cell phones is that everybody drives by and says, I smelled smoke, or geez, so-and-so, there's a fire in so-and-so's backyard. And what it does, for me, it reduces not so much reduces our call volume, but it reduces our workload, because what I can do is I can call up so-and-so at 549 Main Street and say, hey man, do you have a fire in your backyard? Or I can drive by and know that it's a permitted fire, that we've seen the thing and it's a approved pit, and I know that theoretically they're staying safe, right? And especially for our fires that we see in the MD, like they're burning a brush pile, and we do it all the time. Joe Blow decides he's lighting up his brush pile, he gets his permit, and then we get 7 calls in 2 hours later because we see this huge fire on the horizon, You know, we say, oh, roughly where is it at? We look at that, go, yeah, okay. We might send a truck out. Most of the time we don't. We'll call up the homeowner, say, hey man, did you light up your fire? Yep. Cool. So it's basically a way of us kind of double checking everything that's happening and allowing us to make sure that things are being done safely. So if it burns wood, you have to have a permit. If it burns briquettes, no. It's because then it becomes a barbecue, right? And we don't permit barbecues. Now I can't speak for the other municipalities, but in the MD in town of Pinch Creek, we don't permit things like briquette barbecues or the such like that. And that would actually apply even to you get the people that have got the meat smokers. You know, they've taken a fridge. That's basically an appliance more so than a wood fire pit, and we haven't been permitting those either. So, okay, and then there's been lots of questions over the last couple of years, or especially this year, in regards to, while we're on the fire topic, fireworks, and what can I and can't I have within the town and the MD of Pinch Creek, or even the provinces as a whole. So low hazard fireworks, class 1 fireworks, basically the fireworks that you can go buy at the 7-Eleven or the convenience store in the Crow's Nest Pass or up Highway 22, are prohibited in the MD of Pinch Creek in the town of Pinch Creek. And you can't have fireworks here, but it has to be a licensed pyrotechnic trained person. And that's kind of similar to what we saw in Canada last year and the such like that. And they have to be permitted through the fire department and approved by the town and the municipality and the fire department before they can be used. So even though you can go to, say, Longview and go to their little fireworks cabinet and buy the fireworks, it's not legal to use them within the town and the MD of Pincher Creek. And the main reasoning behind that, and I get this question, well, we're having a wedding and I'd like to have fireworks. The reason is that typically if you look at the conditions that we have within our MD on any given summer day when somebody's having a wedding, unless you catch us early in the spring, we've got lots of drying conditions out there and heavy winds that create some significant hazards. So it was felt, and it was actually legislation or bylaws passed by both the town and the MD that restricted the sale of them here. And I agree wholeheartedly with it, actually. So we do it actually 3 different ways. So one thing that in a town it's easy, we get a street address, and actually if we get the street address in our ambulances especially, it pops up on a GIS map system, and it basically gives us a direction to drive right to it. Within the municipal district, we get somewhat the same thing. It'll do its best efforts to point us, drop that GPS marker on the map. And then what we get is a range road and a gate number, or a township road and a gate number. And we've got map books, and I didn't bring one with me tonight, but it's basically a duotang that's got the MD broken down in all the maps, with all the range roads and township roads labeled on there. And you just flip to it, you go to it, you figure out where it is. And all of our people have been rigorously trained to follow through on those maps. Now, that being said, at 2 o'clock in the morning, your eyes are foggy. You know, sometimes you have to think twice as you're reading those maps of what you're doing. But and then the third method that we use is a lot of times through dispatch. Lots of people, it's definitely not required, but they'll provide, say, well, you know, you go to the greenhouse and you turn left and we're the third house on the right with a black roof. The old traditional standby. So we use kind of all 3 methods. We put it all together and do what we can to get there. Now, and the other one that my favorite is actually legal land description. I'm an old boy. These gate numbers and these range roads and township roads are awesome. But you know, you give me a legal land description and I'm golden, because I grew up using those. And as an old electrician, that's how I found all the places I went to out in the back 40. So in the fire trucks, we don't have that GPS map system, so we rely solely on the gate numbering system, and then of course legal lands, and then any types of directions. Because you get some, for example, that you'll get a grass fire that's burning along the forest protection boundary within the MD of Pincher Creek that there is no gate number. You know, so the best what we end up is Sometimes, you know what, we drive to where the smoke is. You know, there isn't an actual, because somebody sees it from Highway 6, there isn't a given legal land description specifically. So we're basically forced to just drive to the smoke. So, kind of answer your question?
Yeah, you just share every now and then examples where
Well, you know what?
the system just plain didn't work.
And that happens on occasion. Absolutely it does.
Do you get good feedback when it doesn't work? And then figure out
We do. We look into it. And what we do is we have, in our department, we've got a risk hazard assessment kind of thing that we do. We fill out a risk hazard report. And it goes back, we track them. And if it's a dispatching error, and we've seen that, you know, and I've done ones where we'll get the report that the accident's on Highway 3 east of Pincher Creek, 5 kilometers. You get out there, there's nothing there. And then you find out, well, no, it actually was on 507 west, right? So is that our fault as a fire department? Well, not really, but we handle it. What we do is we file a risk report with our department, and then what we do is we actually chase back through dispatch. And sometimes it's a GPS error on the cell phone. Sometimes it was a dispatcher error. Sometimes it was a radio communications error. And exactly, and what we try to do is like every other organization, we try to mitigate those risks and reduce those hazards. Right? And I mean, can I tell you that we're 100% successful all the time to getting where we want to go in the fastest time possible? And unfortunately, no. But we do the very best that we can given the resources. And I mean, sometimes it's a matter that we've had people that'll tell us, yeah, we're 3 kilometers east of Pincher Creek on Highway 507. And so you go ripping out on 507 and you actually find out, no, actually they're on 510 out near the dam. And they were just confused because they don't know the road numbers, right? You know, so sometimes what we do sometimes when we get situations like that, how do I deal with it? I'll send out 2 ambulances, one, you know, if we're not really sure where somebody's at, we'll send out more units to try to locate people. You know, so we try to do the best we can to find everybody that we can. So, yeah. I like to get out and talk to people because first of all, it gives, I can, lots of times there's misunderstandings about what services are provided and what we actually do and how we staff ourselves. And, you know, for example, there's 2 full-time firefighters there. There's myself as deputy chief. In my role, I do fire prevention, fire inspections, investigations, emergency. I do, of course, I still work on the emergency response side of stuff. So I do all of the school programs, issue and work on a lot of the permits. We go through all the building stuff that comes through. And then my chief, of course, Dave Cox, my boss, does the entire management thing. So all of the real fire stuff is still handled by casual volunteers. You know, so when you see somebody fighting a structure fire standing on the side of the road at 2 o'clock in the morning or working at Kenow Fire, we had, I should have totaled up the man hours, but I had people down there for 30 days working, and these are casual volunteers. I mean, they were paid for their time, but it meant that they changed their lives to fit that in. So it's a tough. It can be tough sometimes for some of those people, you know. And I know I worked in the volunteer system for 15 years before I became full time, and I spent lots of time working extra evenings and stuff to make up the hours I needed after I skipped out of work for 4 hours to go fight a grass fire. So, but very rewarding nonetheless.